Ever had a night so terrifying it feels like your heart might stop? Just another ordinary day it was, the sun shining brightly as I went about my routine. Nothing out of the ordinary, nothing to suggest that the night would be any different than the countless others. I worked, ate, laughed, and eventually, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I found myself alone in my house. The night was quiet, save for the occasional rustling of leaves or the distant hoot of an owl. I've always found comfort in the solitude of my home, nestled in the quiet outskirts of town. The dim glow of the moonlight seeping through the curtains, the familiar hum of the refrigerator in the background. It was all normal. As the hours rolled on, I started hearing things. Strange noises that didn't fit into the symphony of the night I was accustomed to. A creak here, a thump there. I shrugged it off, convincing myself it was just the house settling, the wind playing tricks on my mind. But as the clock ticked on, the noises seemed to grow louder, more persistent. I tried to drown them out, turned up the volume on the television, but the peculiar sounds persisted. A low thud from the kitchen, a scratching sound from the hallway. It was like the house was alive, echoing with sounds that weren't there before. It's funny how in the dead of night, even the familiar can seem alien. And then, just as I was about to dismiss it all as a product of my overactive imagination, I heard it. A whisper, soft and eerie, like a faint breeze rustling through dry leaves, but unmistakably human. It was a voice in my house where I knew I was alone. So, there I was, in the middle of a night that was supposed to be like any other, heart pounding in my chest, palms sweating. That night, I heard something, a whisper in my house that sent chills down my spine. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the hollow halls of my home. This wasn't just the wind playing tricks or the house settling. It was a distinct sound, like hushed voices sharing secrets they didn't want me to hear. The whispers seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I tried to follow them, to catch hold of their source, but they seemed to be always just out of reach. I moved from room to room, my heart pounding in my chest with every step. The air around me grew warmer, and a strange uneasiness wrapped around me like a shroud. It was as if I was walking into an invisible fog of fear. The living room was empty, yet the whispers seemed to grow louder. The kitchen was as I had left it, but the whispers continued, undeterred by my search. The bedroom was silent, save for the whispers that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The bathroom, the basement, the attic, every room I searched, every corner I peered into was empty. Yet the whispers continued like an unseen presence taunting me. Then, as suddenly as they had begun, the whispers stopped, abruptly, without warning. The sudden silence was disconcerting, as if someone had yanked the plug from a noisy machine. The warmth in the air dissipated, replaced by a chill that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand on end. I stood there in the middle of my own home, feeling more like an intruder than a resident. I was alone, yet I wasn't. I could feel it, a presence, unseen, unheard, but definitely there. Watching, waiting. It was a feeling I couldn't shake off, no matter how hard I tried. The silence was deafening. It was as if the house was holding its breath. My own breath hitched in my throat as I waited for the whispers to start again, for the unseen presence to make itself known. But for that moment, there was only silence. A silence that was as unsettling as the whispers themselves. And in that silence, I felt fear. Real bone-chilling fear, for I knew I wasn't alone. I was never alone. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. A shadow darker than the night itself. It was nothing more than a flicker, a mere whisper of darkness that was there 1 second and gone the next. But it was enough to make my heart leap into my throat. I spun around trying to catch a glimpse of the shadowy figure, but it was like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. It was elusive, slipping away just when I thought I had it in my sights. I could feel it though. It was there, lurking in the corners of the room, just out of my line of sight. The air in the room dropped several degrees. It was a cold that seeped into my bones, a chill that made my breath fog up in front of my face. But that was impossible, wasn't it? All the windows and doors were shut tight, yet I could feel a breeze, a gust of icy wind that seemed to come from nowhere. Then the lights started to flicker. They dimmed, then brightened, then dimmed again, like a heartbeat. On, off, on, off. Each flicker cast long, dancing shadows across the room, shadows that seemed to twist and turn into grotesque shapes. I could see them out of the corner of my eye, these monstrous forms that seemed to be reaching out for me. I could hear my heart pounding in my chest, a deafening drumbeat that drowned out the sound of my own thoughts. I was frozen in place, trapped by my own fear. I could feel it, a presence in the room with me. It was like a weight, a pressure that seemed to press down on me from all sides. It was suffocating, overwhelming, a sense of dread that seemed to consume me. And then I knew. I was not alone. I could feel it, could sense it. There was something in the room with me, something that lurked in the shadows, something that watched, that waited. I felt a chill run down my spine, my heart pounding in my chest. I was not alone. Suddenly the whispers returned, louder than ever, forming a single chilling word. My name. My heart pounded in my chest like a jackhammer, each beat echoing the rhythm of that terrifying whisper. My name. It was like the air itself was speaking to me, its icy breath sending shivers down my spine. The room felt like it was closing in, the walls whispering my name over and over again. I could barely breathe, my chest tightening with each passing second. I felt an urge to turn around, to see who or what was behind me, but my body simply refused. It was as if I was rooted to the spot, my fear an anchor tying me down. I could feel it, though, the presence. It was right behind me, its unseen gaze boring into my back. I could almost feel its breath on my neck, cold and lifeless. Then, without warning, the lights flickered and went out, plunging me into an abyss of darkness. The whispers stopped abruptly, replaced by a deafening silence. It was as if the world itself had stopped spinning. All I could hear was the sound of my own ragged breathing, each breath echoing around the room like a haunting melody. I fumbled around, reaching out for something, anything to hold on to, but all I could feel was the cold, empty air. The darkness was so thick, so suffocating, it felt like I was drowning in it. I was alone, lost in this sea of blackness with nothing but my fear to keep me company. I wanted to scream, to call for help, but I knew it would be in vain. Who would hear me in this desolate place? Who would come to my aid in the dead of night? I was trapped in my own nightmare, with no way out. I stood frozen in fear, the darkness enveloping me. The whispers had stopped, replaced by an ominous silence. That silence was the worst part. It was the silence of the unknown, the silence of the unseen. And in that silence I knew one thing for certain: I was not alone. In the pitch darkness I waited. Each second felt like an eternity. The night's silence was broken only by the haunting echo of the clock, ticking away. The rhythmic sound was the only proof that time was moving, but it felt like I was trapped in a never-ending nightmare. The air was heavy, as if it were thick with the weight of my fear. I could feel the cold, clammy walls of the room pressing in, closing me off from the rest of the world. It felt like I was the only living soul in this desolate place. But I knew I wasn't alone. The room was colder than it should have been. It was as if the very air around me was alive, pulsing with an energy that was not my own. I could feel it, the unseen presence growing closer. It was as if I could hear its breath, a low, guttural growl that sent a chill down my spine. I wanted to run, to escape this unending night, but I was frozen in place, my feet rooted to the ground by fear. I could feel it now, the cold hand of the unseen entity. It was like ice, a cold so penetrating it felt like it could reach into my very soul. My heart pounded in my chest, the rhythm matching the ticking of the clock. Each tick, a reminder of the time slipping away. Each tock, a countdown to the moment of truth. I could feel the cold hand on my shoulder now, the grip tightening. The growl grew louder, closer, until it was all I could hear. I knew I had to face it. I had to confront the fear that had held me captive in this unending night. Gathering every ounce of courage, I slowly turned, ready to face the unseen entity. As I turned around to face my fear, the lights flickered back on, but what I saw was something I never expected.